On today's episode, I'll be talking about the 1991 movie Point Break, starring Keanu Reeves in his first action movie ever. I refuse to see the remake.
If you're looking for a man with no plans or programs, and he always needs a chance to hold hands for romance, or you're looking for the Luke with an old man or cold hands, creature of the night heads for his spotlight, I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Review, a method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews.
All right, everyone, welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews, covering one unsystematically chosen topic at a time. If you like listening to a guy talk about arbitrarily chosen topics in weekly episodes, then look no further. To keep up with the newest content, you can find Brandon at Random Reviews on most major video and audio platforms, as well as all popular social media sites. If you enjoy this, please like and subscribe. I use content engagement as wax for my surfboard. And as you may have noticed, today's movie is Point Break, released on July 12th, 1991, with a runtime of 122 minutes, rated R, budget $24 million, directed by Catherine Bigelow, with writers Rick King and W. Peter Iliff, I think is how you say that. For the score, we have composer Mark Isham. For the cast, we have Keanu Reeves as Johnny Utah, Patrick Swayze as Bodie, Gary Busey as Pappas, Lori Petty as Tyler, and John C. McGinley as Ben Hart. For casting notes, Matthew Broderick, Charlie Sheen, Johnny Depp, Willem Dafoe, and Val Kilmer were all considered for the role of Johnny Utah. For the plot synopsis, an FBI agent goes undercover investigating a group of surfers who are suspected of committing a series of bank robberies. The tagline for this movie is 100% pure adrenaline. It doesn't really feel like a tagline, it just kind of feels like a slogan almost. Anyway, alright guys, let's just dive right into this motherfucking plot. So this movie starts off with people surfing, and the footage of the surfing is interspersed with Keanu Reeves firing guns at targets in the pouring rain at a shooting range. The key differences between the plot of this movie and The Fast and the Furious from 2001 is that in this movie it's surfing instead of street racing, and in this movie you know the main character is a member of law enforcement pretty much immediately, and in The Fast and the Furious it's kind of like a surprise reveal later in the movie. There are some other minor differences between the two movies, but generally speaking, The Fast and the Furious has almost exactly the same plot as this movie, and it has been pointed out several times. I just want to call it to everybody's attention in case you've never seen this and you didn't realize how much overlap there is. John C. McGinley's character, Harp, greets Utah at the bank robbery division of the FBI's LA branch, and Harp really carries on about how great their team is and what a high standard they really hold them to. Utah impresses Harp with his knowledge of the numbers regarding bank robberies in the country, but Harp is kind of a dick to Utah for no real reason, other than Utah is just the new guy, I guess. And so Harp takes Utah to meet Gary Busey's character Pappas, and for some reason that I don't really recall, and I'm not even sure that they actually do explain it, Pappas is actually blindfolded by the pool, and when he meets Utah, he carries on about his asshole new former football player recruit that he's not excited about meeting. Then, when he finds out the person he's talking to is the recruit, he acts all embarrassed, like it really doesn't even make sense that he'd go on at any length about something like that with someone he doesn't really know the identity of when the risk of the mystery person being that person is very real. The movie cuts to just before a bank robbery where the people perpetrating the robbery are all wearing rubber masks of former presidents like Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon, and they call themselves the ex-presidents. They rush into the bank with guns drawn, screaming at the patrons inside the bank about getting down and cooperating because they're just there for money and aren't looking to hurt anyone. Some of them do weird accents or impressions of the presidents they wear the masks of to conceal their identities. And we get a nice little transition as the robbery is complete and they leave the bank, where it goes from watching them go outside and there's a guy that flashes his ass to the camera, and I think it says thank you on his ass, and all of a sudden it transitions to where the footage you're seeing that is movie footage transforms to what looks like surveillance footage that Utah and Pappas are watching. Through some exposition, Pappas establishes that the ex presidents have committed 27 bank robberies in 3 years and have not yet been caught or identified officially. He highlights that they control the crowds very well during their robberies and have never shot anyone during the robberies at all. He also says they never go for the vault, only the cash drawers, and they are always in and out in about 90 seconds. Pappas continues on by explaining that they always dump their vehicle almost immediately and vanish following their heists. Then Harp shows up to tell the two of them to go search a getaway car that was found after the robbery. They find very little evidence in the car, and Pappas is a lot more jaded and has little confidence in solving the case compared to young and vibrant Utah, who is insulted that Pappas is so quick to assume he couldn't bring any new insight to the case. Pappas gets really fired up that Utah insults his negative approach, even though he's not like way off base about anything he says. It's important to remember that Gary Busey typically gives off an energy. If you haven't seen a movie with him in it, he hasn't been in much a lot recently. I would say, as a rule, he feels more unhinged than Nicolas Cage typically does in movies, and that's saying quite a bit. I would just say, when I'm watching Nicolas Cage be unhinged, I don't feel uneasy or fearful. I just feel like Nicolas Cage is doing his unhinged bit. But with Gary Busey, I legitimately get a little perturbed by the whole experience of seeing him act. So if that gives you any sense of how the two of them are and how they compare, that's what it's like. And this interaction between Pappas and Utah really showcases Gary Busey's overacting in a big way as he gets all animated about it. Utah yells at him to snap out of his defeated approach to everything and asks Pappas to share what his theory is about the ex presidents. Pappas explains when they return to the station and start looking at footage that he thinks the criminal gang is actually a group of surfers based on tattoos and tan lines that they have. Utah kind of sort of mocks Pappas for this theory as it seems kind of thin based on the initial explanation. It's like tattoos and tan lines. He doesn't even have specific people in mind necessarily. He is just saying, oh, they have tan lines and tattoos. They're probably surfers. And it's like, how many people in California probably have tan lines and tattoos that are not involved that heavily with surfing? Pappas kind of goes on to explain it a little better, and Utah starts to think it seems a little more plausible. It's explained that their robberies have only ever taken place during the summer months, and they are seemingly living off the robbery money the rest of the year when they're not committing new robberies, which is a little confusing. Why would you take out precious time during the best months to carve sick waves instead of committing the robberies in the off season when it's presumably still pretty decent outside? Then naturally, Pappas pitches the idea that is the crux of the plot of this movie, that Utah learned to surf so he can go undercover. And initially, Utah just refuses to believe in himself, but he begrudgingly agrees to do it. We see Utah trying to go out and learn, and when he nearly drowns, he's rescued by a local woman named Tyler, portrayed by Lori Petty, who chastises him for being too reckless and not being ready for the bodacious waves he's trying to ride, bruh. Lori Petty was actually in another movie that was previously covered on this podcast, and it's actually got oceanic themes to it. It was called Free Willy, so that's some connective tissue there for you. She's been in a few other things, notably the cult favorite Tank Girl, which is a little too campy and ridiculous for my liking. She's pretty for sure, I would say. She's not pretty on the level of a lot of female celebrities that are like upper echelon. I would just equate it to like if I was in the right age range to be attracted to her and I knew her in real life, I would totally have a big crush on her. There's no doubt about that. But that's about as far as I would go with it. So, anywho, Pappas mocks Utah for making his initial contact, of course, be this 20 something woman to try and get in with this surfer crowd. And they look at her rap sheet, but they let him go with it and try and talk more with her. She's got some things on her rap sheet that are not great, but they're not like super serious, violent crimes or anything. It's just she's done some things that most people wouldn't be proud of. So Utah finds her and she's suspicious of him and wants to know why he keeps coming around her and what he wants, which is a totally valid concern, obviously, especially with what we as viewers know about Utah. So it's like the instincts from her are good, but clearly not good enough because obviously, spoiler alert, she does let him get closer to her and get involved with the people she's involved with. But in this moment, he tries to calm her suspicions by explaining that he wants to learn to surf if it kills him, and that he wants to do it because his parents, when he was a kid, especially and growing up, pressured him to do all of this stuff that they wanted him to do when he was younger, including football and school and things like that. And he really just didn't like the fact that they had such control over what he was doing with his life. He explains that they died unexpectedly and he realized all of his goals were just his parents' goals for him, and he wants to surf because it would be something that he legitimately wanted to do. Which is, of course, completely made up by Utah on the spot to appease her suspicions a little bit, but it's not actually accurate. He didn't even really want to do this when they proposed it to him. So naturally, Tyler stupidly lets Utah's story win her over and she agrees to show him how to surf. We get a pretty underwhelming surf training montage with the two of them, and she's giving him some tough love style training, and naturally, this personal interaction between them stokes the flames of a potential romance. Then at one point, Utah sees this surfer riding some killer waves, and Tyler tells him that that's Bodie, who is Patrick Swayze's character. Bodie comes and greets the two of them, and he hassles Utah about his stupid loser beginner surfboard and makes him look pretty fucking dumb. It's pretty clear that Bodie and Tyler are maybe mildly romantically involved or were previously, and Utah gets pretty butthurt about that. But despite questioning Tyler, Bodie allows Utah to join their party. Apparently, Bodie actually remembers Utah from his days as a quarterback at Ohio State before his injury with his knee destroyed his chances at going pro, and he allows the group to believe that he ended up becoming a lawyer after he gave up football with his injury. Then it just cuts to Harp screaming at Utah and Pappas about how much he hates their approach to the undercover work that they're doing and how it's been 2 fucking weeks and they've accomplished nothing in the case. But it kind of seems like that's not a terribly long time for undercover work. It seems like that would take some time, right? You kind of have to work your way in and establish trust and build relationships. You wouldn't be able to get a lot done in a 2 week time frame. I don't know. Maybe it's just, him being pissed off because he just doesn't like them. Harp explains that since they started, the ex presidents have robbed two more banks, and he's frustrated with these two boneheads that are investigating the case with this undercover operation. So, shortly after this talk with Harp, Pappas and Utah are analyzing this hair sample on a computer, and Utah theorizes that if they can isolate the different chemicals in this hair sample, they can figure out where the ex presidents are surfing based on the contaminants that are specific to different beaches. He asks Pappas if he buys this idea, and I'll be honest, this does not sound like a valid way to prove anything. You know what I mean? Like, you could maybe narrow it down a bit if there were certain contaminants present on certain beaches that weren't on others somehow, but it seems like they would all be very similar from one surfing location to another, and it seems pretty flimsy. Like, to me, they could be surfing at different beaches every fucking day, and you might not be able to narrow it down even a little bit. It might be too convoluted. There might be too many chemicals mixed in and not really give you any valid results for that test. Pappas does tell Utah that this doesn't really seem like a super great idea, but he wants to try it anyway just to piss off Harp, which, by the way, as a person who's been in the workforce for a few decades now, I will tell you that just doing things for no reason to just piss off an authority figure is a super great plan of action just to make things easier and better at work in every way because who doesn't want somebody like that to dislike you? Then we get this scene where Utah is sneakily snagging hair samples from these surfers when he's hanging out with them, and it's supposed to be like subtle. He keeps doing this forced surfer voice, and it's strange because Keanu probably could do a really convincing surfer bro impression, but he does almost too good of a job of also making it seem deliberately flat and unconvincing, like he's an undercover officer trying to act like a surfer. But it's because he's doing it as an undercover cop and trying to make it sound forced, it sounds so over the top and fake. I don't believe anybody would ever actually buy it. And then while all this is happening with the hair sample grabbing and the fake surfer bro voice, Pappas is hanging out in his car on the street near the beach while Utah is rinsing himself off, and suddenly a group of unfamiliar dudes come and gang up on him and shut off the water, and he's like, whoa. One of these dudes is played by Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They're clearly suspicious of Utah, this group of guys, and he thinks that they're just some guys being territorial and giving him a hard time, but they tell him they're just gonna fuck him up instead of the more verbal abuse that he's expecting. As they start to hold Utah and take turns punching him, suddenly Bodhi just shows up and breaks up the whole fight. But because Utah is a little hot headed, he doesn't take this as an opportunity to get away from these guys, and he instead uses the chance to punch their leader. Eventually, after the gang is incapacitated, Bodhi and Utah walk away, and Bodhi begins explaining that the guys were a gang of shitbags who believe in nothing.
Yeah, he believes in nothing.
He believes in nothing, Lebowski, nothing.
Pappas uncoincidentally and very deliberately runs into the two of them walking and pretends to be looking for someone who stole his car stereo, which, by the way, used to be a huge problem in the 90s, especially in the early 2000s. If you bought an aftermarket car stereo with a CD player, because so many cars at the time didn't come with CD capabilities, they designed them with these removable faceplates, and people would take them off and usually like lock them in their glove box if they were leaving their car for an extended period of time. Because if you stole the stereo with no faceplate on it, replacing the faceplate was prohibitively expensive. And of course, you may be thinking, Brandon, why on earth do you know this? Were you a thief? How could you possibly realize that the faceplates were so expensive? This was actually commonly known, and I actually know it more specifically because when I was in high school, someone actually stole the faceplate from my car stereo one time when I thought it would be safe to leave it on there, and I think I either forgot to lock my doors or left my windows cracked open too far, and when I tried to buy a replacement after it got stolen, it cost almost as much as the stereo itself, and I even remember like having somebody I was trying to like order it from, I think it was like Pioneer or Alpine or something, and they explained to me that like, hey, yeah, like the reason it's so expensive is not because it really would cost that much, it's that we want to make it more expensive so people don't just steal the faceplateless car stereo and then replace the faceplate. So Bodhi invites Utah to come to a party later that night at his house, and then it immediately cuts to Pappas hassling him for not being smarter, and they go and watch the asshole surfers from earlier as they're entering their place, and it's alluded to that the agents intend to carry out a raid on that house the following morning. It cuts back to the party at Bodhi's house that night, and it's pretty clear Utah and Tyler are gonna hook up. There are just way too many one-on-one intimate moments with them for it to be going in any other direction here. But before any of that can happen, the friends are just hanging out around the bonfire talking about surfing and riding huge bodacious waves. Bodhi talks about the legend of a 50-year storm that is supposed to be coming the following year that will bring the most far out waves seen in an entire generation, brah. Build up to Tyler and Utah hooking up is undeniable and very obvious in their scenes together later on. The two of them join the others late at night to ride waves in only the illumination of their headlights pointed at the beach. Bodie pressures Utah to ride a huge wave, and these wide shots make it pretty clear that they actually filmed this in broad daylight and darkened the footage later on, because I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be able to see jack shit in this sequence if it were actually that dark out and you just had these fucking headlights pointed at the water. Afterwards, Tyler is talking to Utah and she points out that he has a completely different energy about him now, and she says that he originally seemed like he was being forced to learn to surf as a part of a school project or something, but now she says he almost seems happy and they totally make out in the moonlight. And I'm just like, oh God, I hope that this works out so well, this romance between them. I hope that there isn't some deep, dark secret that one of them gets to the bottom of and figures out and kind of ruins the whole thing a little bit. Utah wakes up presumably the next morning from what I have to assume was, what's the PC G rated way to put this? An all night fuck sesh. And he just repeatedly starts saying, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And it immediately becomes clear that he's late for the raid on that one house with the weird surfers that were bullying Utah on the beach. This whole thing just confuses me because it's like he gets to the raid and they're giving him a little bit of shit. And I'm not a cop or anything, I'm not an FBI agent, but why would Utah be a part of this raid in any capacity? Wouldn't this completely blow his cover? Why do they even need him to be a part of this at all? Anywho, they're scoping out this house and there's a man squirming around on a bed, presumably on drugs or something, and a woman is showering. Pappas comes to the front door pretending to be looking for his dog Scooby, and I guess he's doing this as a way to somewhat distract the people in the house, paying more attention to the front door. But the woman who answers the door is really kind of not having it, but she also doesn't just close the door in his face and lets him keep talking to her. And she just keeps saying, no, no, I can't help you, blah, blah, blah. But it seems like the rest of the house has realized they're being closed in on and they start gearing up with firearms. Annoyingly, a push mower is started by a neighbor and makes communication really difficult for the agents, as Utah is seeing what's going on inside this house and is trying to warn them not to go in there because they'll probably get shot lots of times. And Utah keeps telling the agents not to let Pappas reveal his badge, but they can't really understand him. And finally, as everything comes to a head and the girl is telling Pappas to fuck off, all hell breaks loose as he says he's FBI and forces his way in the door and immediately has to use the girl as a human shield as the guys open fire on him. And I don't know. I mean, I understand part of the raid has to be like scoping it out, making sure everything looks okay and like they're all there and all that stuff. But they really botched the shit out of this raid, at least on the approach. And then subsequently, everything else is fucked up because of it. It's like they take way too much time and they kind of reveal that they're coming way too much before they just go in. And it's like, to me, you make some basic spot observations and you break into the fucking house right away so that none of this is like something they have time to gear up for. Because in my mind, these guys should not have had any time between potentially realizing these guys were going to raid the house and being able to like gear up weapons and load things and like do all this stuff and be prepared for them. I don't think that this should have gone down the way it did, and they make it pretty clear that it was pretty well botched. So this random woman starts stabbing one of the agents, and there are a couple of dudes trying to sneak out before they get caught that are the bad guys. And as Utah tries to stop one of them, they crash through a window, and the bad guy tries pushing Utah's face into the blades of this running old school push mower outside that was the one that started running that made it difficult to communicate. And it's crazy to see this push mower because it's like such an old style mower that it doesn't have any of the the normal safety things on it, like, when you have to hold the handle thing down to be able to run a push mower, and if you release it, it shuts the mower off. Well, this is just running, and there's nothing to prevent it from running without somebody there to make sure that it should be running. And I get the sense that this could be like a movie trope thing where it's just like, oh, let's pretend like mowers are like this. Or it could just be that maybe there really were a lot of mowers early on that were like this, that were motorized push mowers, and they were just so short lived in this form before they got the safety features that, like, I had just never seen or heard of these ones that looked like this, because I don't think I've ever encountered one in real life at all. Pappas actually comes and saves Utah from this guy trying to kill him with a mower, and he pats Utah on the back for a job well done. But almost immediately, some very angry guy confronts Utah with Harp, and it's revealed that the DEA had actually been investigating this same group of guys for like 3 months, and the FBI really fucked shit up for him by carrying out this raid. And I'm assuming that there were steps that should have been taken to see if they were already being investigated by another agency. And the problem is that the DEA has a record of all of their movements during that time, and they know they couldn't have possibly carried out the bank robberies that these FBI agents are investigating. So this really, like, it pisses off Pappas and Utah pretty bad. So Utah is pretty bummed because he fucked this up pretty bad, or at least it was partially on him what the fuck up was here. And he's woken up the next day while sleeping with Tyler, and Bodie is at the door and wants them to go surfing with him. Utah is pretty shaken up because he realizes Bodie and company pretty much have to be the ex-presidents, so he makes up an excuse to get out of going surfing and goes to tell Pappas that it had to be them. So the next day, they're staking out a bank that they expect to be robbed by the ex presidents, and Pappas tells Utah to go get him a couple meatball sandwiches, despite the fact that something could happen at any moment here. As Utah is ordering the food at the place, he gets the two meatball sandwiches, a tuna on wheat, and two lemonades, and his total comes to $7.84, and it just enrages me to think I couldn't even buy a single meatball sandwich with no drink for that much now. While he's standing there ordering, the camera angle reveals that the ex presidents can be seen in the background jumping out of their car and entering the bank without Utah ever seeing them, but it seems like he'd at least be watching or looking around more than he is. As Utah comes back with the food, he finds an equally oblivious Pappas who is more worried about his meatball sandwiches and doesn't acknowledge the question when Utah asks him about the car that pulled up to the bank while he was away getting the food. And suddenly, as Pappas is digging into his food, Utah sees the masked ex presidents emerge from the bank with their loot, and he yells out to them and says he's FBI, but the robbers just get into the car to flee. See, this is even more of the same kind of thing where if you have an undercover agent, you wouldn't have him doing the stakeout. You would have two agents that were both not undercover doing the stakeout so that it didn't become incredibly obvious to whoever the perpetrators are that he's undercover and he's an FBI agent. Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Anywho, we get a pretty intense car chase with the agents and the robbers. The robbers continue wearing their masks to conceal their identities from the audience. I say that because I don't know that it would make much sense for at least the driver to try and drive very far with a loose rubber mask on. That doesn't seem like it'd be very advantageous to him. The robbers get in an accident and flee on foot with Utah chasing after them. They go to a gas station and steal a car as the Reagan masked guy makes a flamethrower out of the gas pump nozzle, and it's pretty clear that the Reagan guy is actually Bodie. The others flee in the car without Reagan, and he's forced to go on foot, and Utah just continues chasing him. They go through a bunch of yards and houses and over walls and fences, and Utah is catching up to Reagan, and they end up in one of those long flood control channels, like in the final race in Greece, or the shotgun twirling sequence chase in Terminator 2. As Utah jumps down from this wall, he ends up injuring his leg as he falls, and I think this is a callback to his knee injury from college. Because he's unable to pursue the fleeing suspect, he draws his gun and aims it as Reagan climbs a fence. The camera zooms in on the guy in the Reagan mask super close, and you can see his eyes. And I personally can tell that they're Swayze's eyes because he's got hungry eyes. And as Utah aims at him and Bodhi looks back at him from the fence, Utah realizes he just loves him so much that he can't actually shoot him, and he fires his gun up in the air multiple times and goes, "Ah!"
Have you ever seen Point Break?
No.
Amazing bit in Point Break where they jump over fences.
Is that 9? 29.
Patrick Swayze's just robbed this bank. Keanu Reeves is chasing him through people's gardens. And he goes to shoot Swayze, but he can't because he loves him so much. And he's firing his gun up in the air. He's like, oh!
30.
Have you ever fired your gun up in the air and gone, ah?
No, I have not ever fired my gun up in the air and gone, ah.
So because Utah does this, Bodhi manages to escape. Pappas is frustrated later at headquarters, and he explains to Utah that he doesn't believe he just missed when he shot at the suspect. He thinks Utah is either scared or has gotten too close to Bodhi, but he is confident it's the latter of those two options based on how dreamy and charismatic Bodhi is, of course. Utah is clearly distraught later and wants to tell Tyler about his secret. Tyler boldly assumes that Utah is actually trying to tell her that he loves her, and that's how he's struggling. But that's a little bit too soon, in my opinion. Probably not for a movie, but for real life it would be. It cuts to Bodhi and his guys talking about the situation while sitting around a bonfire. Everyone but Bodhi wants to cut and run because with Utah being revealed as a federal agent, it seems like it's only a matter of time before they're caught. Bodhi bothers the others as he talks because he seems to look at the robberies as more of a game, but all of them believe it's bigger than that and their livelihoods are at stake right now. But Bodhi just asks them to trust him, but I honestly think these dudes would cut and run regardless in a non-movie scenario like this. It cuts to Utah laying in bed and the shadow of a pistol is seen aiming at him, and initially you might think that it's possibly Bodhi or one of his guys. The gun fires and hits the pillow as Utah sits up to find that Tyler discovered his FBI badge. She chastises him for lying to her and seemingly using her, and she wants to know if his parents are really dead, like he told her, and he says that they're actually still alive in Columbus, Ohio, which is a fate worse than death, in my humble opinion. As she continues pointing the gun at him, he tries to explain that he investigates bank robberies, and she was basically his in because they suspected surfers of doing it. He tries to save face with her, but she's feeling too betrayed and just runs off. Utah tries calling her to apologize, and he tries telling her he's never met anyone like her, and he's a real piece of shit for what he did. His door buzzes and he thinks it's her, but when he opens the door, it's actually Bodhi and his guys telling him it's time to go, not really leaving any option for Utah to decline them. It's very tense as Utah tries to tell Bodhi he doesn't really want to surf at the moment, but Bodhi tells him that what he wants to do right now is a very different thing from surfing. Bodhi forces him to get some things together to take with him, and they're all going to go skydiving together, and despite Utah pleading with Bodhi, Bodhi is quite insistent it will all be fine. As they're in the plane, they mess with Utah by continually swapping parachute packs with him to make him think that he's getting one that won't open. Eventually, these guys all jump out of the plane, and they seem to be really happy as they plummet to Earth in a free fall. They lock arms together and encourage Utah to join them, but it seems super suspicious. They break and spread out to deploy their chutes, but Bodhi and Utah continue locked together. They argue about who should deploy their chute, but Bodhi ultimately pulls Utah's for him. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure what the hell the point of this whole skydiving sequence was. Bodhi takes Utah to a van and shows him the cutest little TV screen, and Bodhi explains that this is an insurance policy that he has. Utah presses play to see that they actually kidnapped Tyler to use her as leverage over Utah to make it so he can't do anything to them. Utah tries to threaten Bodhi, but Bodhi explains that he's the only one who knows where she is, and if he doesn't show up to meet the guy, who is named Rosie, who is holding her captive, Rosie is just going to kill her by default without any further orders. Now Bodhi is actually making it clear to Utah that Utah has to work with them to rob another bank and get to the meeting spot afterwards in time to prevent Tyler from being killed. As Bodhi gives Utah an unloaded shotgun to take with him for the robbery, Utah tells Bodhi that this is his wake-up call and gives him the masterfully delivered line,
I am an FBI agent!
I know, man, isn't it wild?
but Bodhi don't care. Bodhi don't give a shit. They put on their masks and they don't give Johnny one, which is, I guess, hopefully done in order to help him not be gunned down when the FBI spots him. As the robbery begins, Bodhi is being more reckless and is taking more time than usual for some reason, and he decides to go for the vault, despite them not usually doing that in prior robberies to save time. Utah is obviously frustrated, and it's shown that one of the bank hostages on the ground is a plainclothes police officer who is considering disrupting this whole thing. And then eventually, this cop does actually get up to confront the robbers, and Utah reveals his badge, but the cop still shoots him twice. And luckily, Utah is wearing a bulletproof vest. Two of the robbers get shot, and one dies in Bodhi's arms, and you can just tell Bodhi is about to lose his shit, and he hits Utah and leaves him laying on the floor of the bank before he flees. Harp is furious with Utah because the cop died and multiple people were shot, and Utah is stuck in handcuffs after all this. And somehow, Apis manages to convince Harp to let him take Utah in, and Utah tells Pappas as they drive away where the robbers are going, but they can't actually shoot them or stop them, which Pappas is confused by. Utah confronts Bodhi as they're literally just packing up their loot on the fucking tarmac, and it's made clear that Utah did not come alone and that Roach is also not with Bodhi and the other robber that are there packing the bags. Utah tells Bodhi that they killed an off-duty cop, and Bodhi refuses to give up Tyler because she's his only insurance policy. Utah tells Bodhi if he tells him where Tyler is, he will simply be able to walk away from the situation. Then all of a sudden gunshots start firing and Roach and Pappas are firing shots. Pappas takes out Roach, but Utah refuses to allow him to shoot Bodhi for fear that it will actually result in Tyler's death. Ultimately, Roach is able to recover enough to shoot Pappas in the back with his shotgun. Utah tries to convince Bodhi that fleeing in a plane is a really bad idea because they'll be able to track them wherever they go. Bodhi tells Utah they have to finish this together, and they board the plane to take off in the tiny little thing. Bodhi's plan appears to be that they will jump from the plane in midair to escape, but he knows Roach is just not doing well as he's in this plane, and Utah points out to Roach that he doesn't really have long to live, and the reason he's feeling cold is because he's actually lost so much blood. As Bodhi is giving radio instructions to the guy Rosie, who has Tyler, he refuses to tell him to release her, as Utah requests him to do. Roach and Bodhi jump from the plane and leave Utah there to die, but Utah jumps out after them with no parachute in a pretty fucking ballsy move, honestly. Utah somehow manages to land on Bodhi and tells him to pull his cord or he'll just shoot him, but he ultimately can't shoot him and holds on as he pulls the cord himself, but there's ultimately not enough time to deploy the chute properly before they land, but they survive the fall pretty much unscathed, and Bodhi's getaway vehicle is coming to find them in the desert. Bodhi goes to walk away and he surprises Utah by telling them to let Tyler go, and she comes out and embraces Utah. Bodhi exclaims to Utah that he'll see him in the next life, and he rides away. We see Utah sometime the next year, stopping at the beach for some reason as it rains hard outside. The other surfers are leaving because of the downpour, but Utah knows Bodhi wouldn't miss the sick waves of a 50-year storm. And naturally, Utah finds Bodhi on the beach. He explains how he kept looking for him everywhere and kept narrowly missing him at every turn over the last year, and even knows a lot of Bodhi's accomplices didn't make it. Utah just kind of tells Bodhi that he's going down for everything he did, and the two of them start to brawl on the beach, and Bodhi has the opportunity to drown Utah when he gets the upper hand on him, and as Bodhi releases him, Utah reveals his air support and agents coming to get Bodhi as he handcuffs Bodhi's hand to his. Bodhi begins pleading with Utah to let him get one last wave in this storm of a lifetime, and of course, Utah lets him for some dumb reason. The agents come up and yell at Utah for letting Bodhi go, and Utah says he didn't let him go, and when the agents say they'll get him when he comes back in, Utah casually explains that Bodhi won't be coming back. Utah throws his badge on the ground as he walks away in the downpour, and we roll credits. Alright, so trivia for this movie. As early as 1986, in early pre production, Ridley Scott was originally planned to direct the film, but ultimately ended up doing Thelma and Louise instead. Executive producer James Cameron, who was married to director Catherine Bigelow at the time of production, claims that he and Bigelow did a significant amount of uncredited rewriting and writing for the film to establish a better flow for the plot. The film's working titles included Johnny Utah and Riders on the Storm, but both were rejected because they told little about the subject matter of the film, even though there are lots of movie titles like that. Patrick Swayze was an accomplished skydiver and took part in the big skydiving scene himself. He made 55 jumps in total. 2 months before filming, Reeves, Swayze, and Petty trained with pro surfer Dennis Jarvis on the Hawaiian island of Kauai. Swayze often refused to use a stunt double and claims he nearly died between 6 and 10 times while shooting the film. He broke 4 ribs during filming. It's weird that he didn't just say he nearly died 10 times. Like, were some of those like he feels like they were close calls, but maybe he didn't almost die. I don't know. Keanu Reeves observed real FBI agents in Los Angeles to study for the role. He also practiced with UCLA quarterback coaches to help with the football scene. Tyler explains to Johnny Utah that Patrick Swayze's character is named Bodhi, the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is a term in the Buddhist religion meaning an enlightened being who, out of compassion, forgoes nirvana in order to save others. Bodhi means wakefulness. Let's see, what else do we have here? Johnny Utah became an FBI agent after a knee injury ended his football career. In real life, Keanu Reeves was once an aspiring hockey player who suffered a knee injury and went on to become an actor. Patrick Swayze also suffered a serious knee injury playing football and went on to become an actor himself. 20th Century Fox had made plans for a sequel to this film to be released in the summer of 1993. In fact, a script had been written and it was actually in pre production. Despite this original film being pretty high grossing, the studio decided to scrap the sequel project altogether. Shockingly, Patrick Swayze is not the one wearing the Reagan mask during the foot chase sequence. Instead, his stunt double, Scott Wilder, performed the scene because Swayze was in Europe doing press for the movie Ghost. As I probably mentioned earlier, the skinny long haired guy who is named Tone in War Child and Bunker's gang is Anthony Kiedis, the lead singer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And as I also mentioned earlier, The Fast and the Furious from 2001 liberally borrowed many of the elements of its plot from this film, with the exception of using street racing instead of surfing and skydiving, and truck robberies instead of bank robberies. There are actually only a few key differences between the two plots. It's pretty remarkable how similar the two plots are. Alright, so on to info and ratings. Opening weekend, 8.5 million. Worldwide gross, 83.5 million. IMDb rating, 7.3. Letterboxd rating, 3.8. Rotten Tomato Critics score, 70%. Rotten Tomato Audience score, 79%. Personal rating, 4 out of 5 stars. Praise for this movie. This one is just a fun action thriller. There are a lot of exciting sequences, and we get a lot of well built tension throughout with the whole them not knowing that Johnny is undercover and that he's investigating them, and it's pretty awesome. Criticism, I like Keanu, but his acting performance was not the best here. And the other criticism I have is how ridiculous and unrealistic and movie tropish a lot of the things that happen are, especially with the things that they do that they wouldn't have done that would have blown Johnny's cover that I mentioned. All right, everyone, thank you for stopping by today. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.
I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Review, a method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews. What you hoped you would see is half-blind with hats tied, with all the dates of release for Footloose, The Dark Knight, a Kurt Russell brain freeze, Rear Windows and Gaslights. I'm Billy and you're Meg, Sharon Stone, the legs spread. The part starts with the eggs, you won't stop till you're dead. I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Reviews. No method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews.